Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Pick it up next week. Visionary adepts can entertain angels. Most, however, are unable to construe the manifestation of angelic hosts in varied form. We are precarious when in the company of angels. It seems it is beyond our scope to comprehend the interventional spirit, ignorant and dismissive. We placate such occurrence should it occur, relegating the specter of such possibility to imaginative inclination. Few understand ceremony which could invoke angelic interlude, seeking dialogue with ethereal proprietor, the Holy Spirit. Welcome all, I'm your host Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen on Studio B at Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, and I thank you for joining me for what should be the last in the series on the topic of the ancient mysteries associated to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, or Thoth, and to Atlantis, the prophecies associated with them, and the things such as remote viewing, which are connected to the esoteric aspects of our ancient past and the mythology, the legends and lore of many cultures and peoples worldwide. And that the things that we've come to know. Hello, everyone. Welcome, Olive and Love and Darla, Matthew, R3, and Girl and PDX and all the rest, Nilla, Sky, all those that are not in the immediate scroll, Comet, Daku, Herbal, Karen, Patrick. There's a lot of you in the chat room. George, Hemp, Henry, and that's just what I see on the side of the chat box. But thank you, all of you, for joining us, and it's going to be an interesting show, I believe. And after this week and next week, we're going to have a string of guests joining us to speak about many, many different topics, and all of them are very well versed in their research, and will share revelation which is connected to the things that we are dealing with as world, and as far as the push for New World Order, the whole thing with Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini, and the orchestration of 3 global wars in order to push the agenda for global government, and the directives that they have on the Georgia Guidestones, which are, the emphasis for depopulation, control, police state measures where they can rule with impunity, and also the whole agenda for the strong delusion and the revelation of the fallen angels and their presence here upon this planet and within this solar system. And that it reminds me of something that Arizona Wilder had said in an interview that she had with Ike on the strange connections between the Nakash, or the fallen angels, the rebel angels, as parading as off-worlders or as gods and the creators of humanity, but that the ruling elite have these connections with these beings, with this ancient serpent, what the Bible in Revelation 12 cites as that old dragon, that ancient serpent, known as the devil and Satan, which has deceiveth the whole world. And those of you that have followed my work or have read my books, you know that I equate the ancient dragon and the Nakash of Genesis chapter 3 with being that being, or that host of beings, a pantheon of beings, that these individuals were worshipped by the pre-Adamic cultures and civilizations, and even largely worshipped by much of the world even today. And that the elites of the world, the supposed royals that are sitting on the thrones of the world, it also is in connection to their having on their coat of arms the personification, the symbolism of the ancient dragon, or the feathered serpent, or what is in modern times the eagle, which we know that in America the eagle is a symbol for, well, we think it's a symbol for the bald eagle and the great, which is very elegant and graceful in flight. But if you look to the ancient traditions, and like in Rome, they also had the symbolism of the eagle on their banners, on their standards, and that these particular eagles, prior to whether it was a two-headed eagle or a regular eagle, that the embodiment of the eagle actually is traced back to the phoenix, and that the phoenix is one of those personifications of a feathered serpent or a winged snake. And so all these things connect together. And in the last show prior to the ending of it, I read really quick. We ended with a reading of what was the 8th tablet of the 15 that are available to us. And it's in my opinion, the most intriguing tablet of them all. And that it memorializes how the Anunnaki, or the rebel angels, in their feathered serpent form, how they were able to penetrate and to take over the rulership of planet, and to parade as the kings and queens, the presidents, prime ministers, those that are basically controlling the nations of the world, and that have put forth an agenda which is contrary to the goodwill of humanity and to what would be beneficial destiny or fate as far as the collective of humanity. And so these kind of things are completely, absolutely, and 100% connected to the esoteric aspects of what we are dealing with as world, as far as the New World Order and the secret societies and their connections to the Brotherhood of Darkness or the Sons of Belial, the worship of Baal and Ashtaroth and individuals of such nature, and that a lot of the pagan cultures that worship the pantheon of gods and goddesses, and a lot of times they will depict them in hybrid form. Sure, Olive, no problem. I will absolutely accept calls. Just give me a little bit of time to establish the premise for what we're going to be going into, because I'm going to be reading some very interesting information connected to what we are talking about and what we have been talking about over the past 4 shows. And this is the whole series that I'm doing is going to set the premise for what we're going to be going into as far as the guests that will be coming on. And the first of which will be Carolyn Hamlet and Dan Duvall. And those that are familiar with Carolyn's work, you understand that she was part, like Arizona Wilder, she was part of the mechanism of the New World Order and born from one of these illuminous, very wealthy and elitist families. And like Arizona Wilder, she had to escape and really abandon everything that she had connections to. And that she coming to see the light and the truth of the gospel and realizing that she was on the other side of the fence as far as that gulf, that divide which separates the righteous and the wicked, which is the same gulf which divides the paradise from Sheol and Tartarus, that she wanted to get right with the Most High God, which is Christ, Yeshua, some call him Jesus Christ. And that his embodiment, his incarnation in the flesh, was not, that he had largely pre-existed before his current flesh embodiment, which is also similar for all of us. And the only thing that would make us different from Christ and from the Father, as he calls him, or Yahweh Elohim, is that they were the pre-existing God, the one God, the Most High, the Creator that created all other things. And that we were part of the angelic host, the spiritual hierarchy that is known and written about as the sons of God, and that the whole war in heaven on our actions and the determinations that were made during that time, our spiritual lives, our spiritual embodiment prior to our flesh embodiment, that those decisions are catalysts for why we find ourselves in flesh now, or what it says in the Bible in Psalms 82, that we would have to die like men. As angels, we would have to die like men, because the same punishment that went forth for Lucifer and as well as Adam and Eve is the same punishment or the same sentence that all of us had been sentenced to, that judgment of coming into the flesh. All of us find ourselves, under that age, that world age, in that particular that, we find ourselves incarnated in flesh now. But anyways, so I'm going to talk about some of those things, and we'll pick it up with the Emerald Tablet, and then I want to share some of the things that Arizona Wilder had put forth in talking about something else that has just recently come forth, and I have not even had a chance to review it, but one of my friends told me about the Farsight Institute. And those of you that have heard me mention them know that they are an eclectic group of ex-military remote viewers, and that they are the best of the best at what they do, and that they utilize some of the techniques as talked about in the Emerald Tablets, as far as, because astral projection or lucid dreaming is similar to remote viewing, in my opinion, and that they utilize such techniques in order to gather information about certain targets, and they're not, prior to viewing them and seeing them and sensing and writing down a data set for what it is that they see, they are not told what the target will be, and are not given any other details other than a set of questions which would, guide their remote viewing sessions. But it isn't until afterwards, after the data sets are, sent in and compiled, that they are even told what the focus of the session was. And it's very interesting because the first time I had heard about them was in their connection to the work that they did on how the pyramids of Egypt were constructed and whom was responsible for their construction. And it was in that the work that they did and the information that they released, because they did a video on this, that I learned that they had remote viewed what they call the overseers, and that these overseers were, in their own words, praying mantis-like people, or reptilian in scale, and that the pre-Adamic humans, which they had utilized as the menial labor, the slave labor, and that the pyramids were, not created with rolls, logs, and huge, massive amounts of human strength, but that they were able to utilize energetic instruments and ley lines and things of that nature to lift very heavy stones and to make them basically anti-gravity technology to lift such huge megalithic type stones and to place them in formation. And that this was how this, the pyramids were. And a lot of the other megalithic structures also, even though they only remote viewed this one, but it was the same beings that did a lot of these megalithic structures, and that the same technology was utilized here in the construction of the pyramids, as well as, I would say, many of the megalithic structures worldwide. And also, not just here on the Earth, but also on other planets like Mars and the Moon, and other places like the monolith on one of the moons of Mars. And the reason I mention them and talk about that is because they just did a whole nother video series where they remote viewed Mars and just, released a data set. And as I mentioned, I was not able to review that prior to doing this show, but I absolutely plan on doing so. And that another interesting thing, which you can find the data set for this as well at the Farsight Institute, is many of you have heard me mention and speak about the timeline for Genesis, or the timeline for creation, and where I talk about the war between the Lord of Hosts and the dragon Tiamat, and how I equate that with being how the old earth as Tiamat was split asunder and destroyed as a watery planet that had once had a cloud layer enveloping it, much like the outer planets, which are totally covered. Their hardened core and the surface are covered by this cloud layer. And all we see when we look at them is these cloud layers, but we don't actually see the subsurface or the surface of the planet. But anyways, the Enuma Elish and the other epic creation accounts speak about the destruction of what was the ancient earth and how it came to settle in the orbit that we are currently in, and that after such destruction, the land and the ocean and the rivers and all those things settled, and also the planets and the sun and the moon and the stars became visible. And then after this destruction and reconfiguration of the planet, then life occurred here in the multiplicity that we find it in now. And the reason I mention this is because they also did a data set where they speak about this, the destruction of the planet that used to be where the asteroid belt now is. And these are all, as I said, ex-military remote viewers that are looking into some of the anomalous, as far as the manifestations of the things like the pyramids, the creation of them, whether there was life on Mars, structures on Mars, even like with, how the asteroid belt came about. They have done work on those things, and their work has basically confirmed the things that I wrote about in my books and the release of those books where I talk about these particular things. I don't know how long the Farsight Institute has had their website up and their information available. It would truly be interesting to see. But to me, it's confirming witness as to what the Most High has led me to in the revelation that I have shared with you through my books and also on my various radio programs. And so we're going to talk about some of those things when we come back from the first break. We'll pick it up with where we left off in the Emerald Tablets. And yes, Olive, he says that this was the separation of light and darkness, and also how the visible worlds came to be. And it talks about this as the dividing of the waters in the Genesis account of the heavens from the upper heavens from the lower heavens. It's all the same thing. It's just defined differently by different peoples, different accountings, but basically the same event is memorialized and immortalized by all the mythologies of the various peoples of the world. And even Credo Mutwa, in his accounting as the oral traditions of the Sangoma, the priesthood, the secret societies, the shamans of South Africa, of which he is the storyteller and the wisdom keeper, he shares the same information and confirms the same things that I'm talking about here. And so in the series, in the shows that I've done on these topics, if you want to hear any of that, I share and read from his accounting as well as that of the Hopi prophecies, the prophecy of the red and blue star Kachina, and the whole Colburn Bible. It talks about this as well as the destruction and recreation. What the Bible speaks about as the destruction of the first world age. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23, where it says that when there was not yet any man, all the birds of the heaven had fled, and the cities of the wilderness were all destroyed. It's speaking about the judgment that was brought upon Tiamat. Even in the book of Job, it speaks about the splitting asunder of Rahab. And Rahab is Tiamat, Maldek. It's all the same planet. Those are all various names of the planet that used to be where the asteroid belt was. Phaeton is another one of the names of it. But that after its destruction, it became the new Earth, or what the Sumerians call Ki. And so we'll pick that up there as well. And there's some interesting testimony that I'm going to be reading as far as from Arizona Wilder, which connects to what Credo Mutwa speaks about as the Nakash, the Chitta Uri. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. And as I said, I'm going to start with where we had ended in the previous show, because in my opinion, this is the most important aspect of the whole Emerald Tablet of Thoth, especially in connection to what we have been speaking about. And let me actually post in the chat room what we're going to be talking about, because I did not do so. And then we'll get into it. But as I said, and as I had mentioned, it's my opinion that the veiled aspect of this revelation and what it's talking about here in this particular tablet is so very important for us, this generation, since we're the last generation, the generation which will see the return. I apologize, and for some reason it went back to being on mute. But anyways, I was mentioning that. Thank you, Olive. I appreciate that. I was just mentioning that we're going to pick up with where we had stopped off in the Emerald Tablet 8, because this is so important for our generation as the fig tree generation, the last generation, all the information that is connected to the revelations that we are privy to, for explaining the principalities, the powers, the rulers of darkness, wickedness in high places, that even though it seems... I'm back on, I apologize. I was muted. I unmuted it, but then it went back to being mute. So let me just tell you in the chat room. Okay, there's going to be a little delay, so you'll catch up with me in just a few minutes. I think I was muted for like a few minutes. Okay, anyways, and so I'm going to go ahead and get into this and read this, and then we'll tie it into what we were dealing with as world. And it's going to connect to, again, that the veiled aspect of the new world order. And I'm not going to elaborate because I did so in the previous show. I'm just going to read it and set the foundation for the rest of the revelation we're going to be jumping into. Speak I of ancient Atlantis. Remember, this is from Thoth, who was an Atlantean priest king, and that he was sent to, after the destruction of Atlantis, he went to Egypt and helped them to establish the culture and civilization there. And that the reason the Atlantis was destroyed is because there was a division among the rebel angels, the Anunnaki. Some were getting involved in dark magic and opening ritualized stargates where things such as victim sacrifice, the blood was being offered, children sacrificed, things of that nature, which was invoking and calling in very dark entities, interdimensional forces. And then the other side of it is that there was a group of the rebel angels dedicated to truth and to light and to the law of one, and also to the knowledge of the Most High, that they were at war with the sons of Belial. And the Dead Sea Scrolls speaks about this in the scroll, the War Scroll, it's known as, the war of the sons of light with the sons of Belial, or sons of darkness. And so it's going to set that whole premise up. Speak I of ancient Atlantis, speak of the days of the kingdom of shadows. Remember, they got involved in very dark ritual, and that was the reason for the impending judgment that was sent by the Most High to destroy Atlantis. Speak of the coming. Hold on. I need to zoom out just a little bit, so give me just a minute, because I can't see some of the words. But all right, one. Okay, that's better. Speak of the coming of the children of shadows. Out of the great deep were they called by the wisdom of earth men, called for the purpose of gaining great power. Far in the past, before Atlantis existed, men there were who delved into darkness, using dark magic, calling up beings from the great deep below us. Forth came they into this cycle. Formless were they of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of earth men. Only through blood could they have formed being. Only through man could they live in the world. In ages past were they conquered by the masters and driven below to the place whence they came. But some there were who remained, hidden in spaces and plains unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. When the blood was offered, forth came they to dwell among men. Which this brings me to a part of the Arizona Wilder testimony that I want to share real quick. She says, well, it's kind of twofold. The question was, what's the connection then between you having psychic abilities, those being recognized from the start and you being brought through to conduct their major rituals. Arizona says, well, it's kind of twofold. First of all, they needed the psychic abilities because they control or attempt to control events. Because I would have the ability to foretell what was going to happen. And they needed the information to try to control an outcome that was good for them. The second thing is that during the rituals, you had to have psychic ability. You have to be very powerful in that way to call out the old ones who are also reptilian, that come from another dimension. They actually materialize from out of another dimension and are present at rituals. And they are so powerful, and there is such an evilness about them that they want out of this other dimension, and they have to be called out by someone who has that power. And the reptilians don't have this power. That's very important. They don't have this power to call out these old ones who have to do with them. One other part. What is it that humans have that the reptilians don't have? That means they don't have the power to connect interdimensionally, and some humans do. Arizona says, we have the ability to foresee, to be able to become vibrationally higher and see into those levels, go into those levels, and in fact, agencies use this. Remember I was telling you about the remote viewing? They call it remote viewing. Humans have the ability to go into the past, to go into the future, to go to other places, to astrally leave their body and to see things. And we always had this ability. So during ritual, these old ones are called out. And they are what Christianity would have called the demons. They are called out, and there is a circle that has a hexagon in there, which is a powerful occultic symbol. And then there is a pentagram, and then in the middle of that, there is a triangle. And if you're the one calling them out, then you stand in the triangle so that you're not devoured or taken by these creatures that come out. All right. Now, in the next part, we're going to get to some of the blood offering. But I wanted to go ahead and read that and tie that into what we are reading from. Because remember, these beings are called from the deep below, and they are cited as in the Emerald Tablets as being formless and of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of earth men, and only through blood could they have formed being. And the other part of it was, lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. When the blood was offered, forth came they to dwell among men. All right, keep that in mind. We're speaking about those dark entities, what the Bible refers to as the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness, not of this world. Okay. In the form of man move they amongst us, but only to sight were they as our men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men, crept they into the councils, taking forms that were like unto men, and slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdoms, taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered. Only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and to rule in his place. All right, so basically this passage is talking about these reptilians, these Nakash, the feathered serpent, or what we know as dragons, or the dragon-like beings, the Nagas, or whatever you want to refer to them as, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, all the same beings, the Nakash. These beings snuck into the ruling governments, the monarchies of the world, and taking over the forms of these particular individuals that were ruling as kings, queens, princesses, and princesses. They were able to take over the collective fate of the world and to make decisions for nations and in a conglomerate of nations. So basically, globally, their impact was felt and their directive was asserted. Slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdoms. So not only did they take over and possess their bodies, but assassination, taking over their forms, ruling over man. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and rule in his place. This is exactly what occurred over time in history and being, and why it is that Princess Diana speaks of the Queen Mother, or the Queen Elizabeth, as being reptilian, or a lizard, or even a toad. You remember the Bible speaks about the demons that come, describes them as being frog-like. It's the same. All of it is the same thing. All right. I guess I'll go. I'm going to go ahead and read this part. No, I'll finish this and then I'll read that. Swift then they lifted the veil from the serpent and cast him forth from place among men. Yet beware, the serpent still liveth. These beings, the hiding from and ruling from the shadows and ruling, Oz behind the mask. They, even though they were cast out, as it says in this text, and that they were removed from power, they have reasserted and have again taken over the collective will, fate, and destiny of humanity. Yet beware, the serpent still liveth in a place that is open at times to the world. Stargates, rituals, things of that nature. Unseen, they walk among thee in places where the rites have been said. The rites, the rituals, the magic, the stargates being open, all of that is connected to their being called forth into this dimension. Again, as time passes, onward shall they take the semblance of men. All right. So there again, it's warning us again, they're going to take on the semblance of men. There was another passage where it says, know ye, O man, that far in the future invaders shall come from out of the deep. Okay, keep that in mind when we go into this other aspect. Okay, and so I want to read this from Arizona Wilder's testimony. And this will lead us into Mars as well. Okay. I need to skip just a little bit. Alright, this is talking about them. Alright, hold on. Okay. I have to add at this point that my mother is my mother, but I am not biologically related to my father. This is Arizona Wilder speaking in an interview with David Icke. And this has to do with the bloodlines. And his was considered impure. And this is all about the purity of the bloodline. And that is why I am involved in this. There are people who are involved in this that is not so much because of the bloodline, but that they have the ability to dissociate and to be used as slaves by these people. You say that you come, this is Ike, you say that you come from a certain bloodline, and there is this obsession with bloodlines, this brotherhood the Illuminati have. Why is that, Arizona? Because what first started coming out was about the Aryans. The Aryans and the purity of the blood, and what it's all about is that the blood and the menstrual blood contains something that is important for the propagation of this race that is controlling things on this planet. And these people that are in the organization that the Council of 13 is under, and they have something called the Grand Druid Council or the Octagon, they are called the Illuminati. And the Illuminati are actually run by these 13 bloodlines, which are all of the royal families in Europe and in England. And they need the blood because they are, in fact, not human. They take human shape, but they are reptilians. And they need the blood. The blood helps them maintain their reptilian shape, and it helps them maintain their sanity. And it helps them to live in this world because they are not from this world. Okay, so you see how this fits into what we just read from, as far as in the form of man move they amongst us, but only to sight were they as our men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted. The glamour meaning when they can't hold form. And then they appear to man as men among men. Crept they into the councils, taking forms that were like unto men, slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdoms. Basically taking over the royals, the elites, the kings and queens, ruling over man. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man, ruling this place. I mean, it all fits into the testimony of not only Arizona Wilder, but Princess Diana. And so the blood ritual and the maintaining of the purity of the bloodline, all of that has to do with their being reptilian in form. Nakat, shape-shifting Nakat. All right, we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I have with me, Jack, are you there, brother?
I'm right here, Zen. How am I coming through?
You sound loud and clear. How you been, brother?
Oh, pretty good. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I listen to you every week.
All right, well, I appreciate it.
Okay, go ahead, Zen. I got a call. Hang on.
All right, just mute it. I'm gonna read something real quick, and then I'll get you to comment afterwards. All right. I wanted to follow up on what we had talked about prior to going on to the break. But also, I want to make mention, everybody, that if you can, to please support the network, the Revolution Radio, and all of our efforts and endeavors to do the things that we do and bring in to you the information that we are able to and blessed to be able to share and speak about in as far as, truth is concerned, because there are so many stations out there that are just going through the motions and just sharing, in my opinion, things that are not fully relevant as far as understanding our condition and what we're dealing with, as far as the elites being, devil worshippers and Satanists, and why they do these particular blood rituals, and that they're being controlled. They are just really puppets on a string. They're being controlled by outside forces, and that this is a war of spiritual proportion that we don't understand, but that it speaks about in Ephesians as the powers, the principalities, again, the rulers of darkness, wickedness in high places. And so, that being said, I want to follow up and I want to follow up with what we were talking about as far as the blood ritual, and just to read the last portion of it. It's because I think it's so very important and relevant to the discussion. They are called the Illuminati, and the Illuminati are actually run by these 13 bloodlines, which are all of the royal families in Europe and in England, and they need the blood because they are in fact not human. They take human shape, but they are reptilians, and they need the blood. The blood helps them maintain their reptilian shape, and it helps them maintain their sanity, and it helps them to live in this world because they are not from this world. All right, I'm just going to read one other portion connected to this, and then I'll get you to comment, Jacker, because I know you probably got an interesting comment on all of this. Ike says, does that relate to what the Nazis call the viril power and what the Hindus call the serpent power in the blood? Arizona Wilder says, yes. The blood has something in it. It has secretions from the pituitary gland and from the pineal gland. And it has a very strong drug in it. This is the one that keeps them from going crazy. And it's like heroin or like endorphins. And it's much stronger. But what they need for it to be secreted in the blood is terrorization of their victims before they are killed for their blood. Or if a young woman is beginning to menstruate, they need the menstrual blood, and they have to terrorize them in order to get this amount in the blood. One other thing. Is this what other people have told me about, that at the point of great terror, like the point of sacrifice, there's an adrenaline that enters the bloodstream? Is this what they are looking for? Arizona. Yes, and this other element comes and secretes out through the blood. This all comes out through the blood at that time. And it's at that point that they are actually staring into the eyes of this reptilian. They are staring into the eyes of this person, and it's a hypnotic gaze these reptilians have, and it holds the victim in an absolute trance and a trance of terror. And then they are killed at that moment as they are staring into their eyes, and they can't hold their shape when this happens. The human shape they cannot hold. They go back into their reptilian shape as this is happening, because it's like an animalistic type of excitement of the kill, and oftentimes they will just rip into the victim and eviscerate them and start eating the flesh of this person too. All right, let me get you to comment here, Jacker, and then I'll read one more aspect connected to what we're talking about.
Right. There's been people that they hotel people, 5-star hotel people, but there's been more than one that has said a high-ranking politician or celebrity actually travels with blood. In fact, there was one maid that she actually came out and said, because she helped clean the room of Al Gore, but that Al Gore actually traveled with containers of blood. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and they found somebody reported Lady Gaga as bathing in a bathtub full of blood. And that was reported. And so, yeah, and, you know, I think a lot of that is connected to what we're talking about here. And even though it sounds completely bizarre, you know, and sounds just like something even beyond science fiction, I mean, this is the reality. I mean, there's too many confirming witnesses, disjointed individual accounts from people that have never met, different parts in history, eras of history, that all are basically asserting the same thing as what we are talking about here. I'll get you to comment again, and then I'm going to read one other aspect. Jack, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. No, go ahead and read, Zen. Go ahead.
All right. This is also connected to what we're talking about as far as the blood rituals and why they do the things that they do. It says, this is Arizona continuing, but I skipped some of the interview. She says, I believe there's a time coming, because of what I've been told, when they are not going to bother having to hold that human shape as they had to before. And they want that time to come. It's almost upon us. Remember from the Emerald Tablets, I had read, "Know ye, O man, that far in the future invaders shall come from out of the deep," that this is all connected to this particular thing. Hold on one second. All right. I just had to take a sip of water. All right. Now I'm going to read another thing that's connected to this. And then we'll read something that's connected to Mars, because this is another aspect of the story. But from a different portion of the interview, it says, David Icke, why do the reptilians want to manifest these demons at their rituals? Arizona, it brings power to the rituals. It brings power to them. They are told things by these entities, and they are encouraged to go on with what they are doing. And knowledge is imparted to them through these entities, but it takes a person with the ability to bring them out and make them answer, because they don't want to cooperate. But they have to cooperate when the right person has control over them. Ike, it has to do with that person's energy and ability, question mark? Arizona, yes. Ike, you talked about the Aryan race coming from Mars. One expression of it seems to be very clearly what we call the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians had two deities, St. George, which became a British deity, who defeated the dragon, which seems incredibly symbolic, and also St. Michael, who, according to the legend, banished Satan, or this negative force, into the abyss. Is this symbolism of the abyss anything to do with the fact that these reptilian demons of another dimension are somehow locked into a time-space prison, and they can't get out? They can only get out when they are brought out in that way. Arizona Wilder, yes. They want out of that dimension. They have been thrown into that dimension, and they can't leave that dimension. And that's actually what the abyss is about, being in a different dimension. It's like something to do with the fourth dimension. And I'm going to skip this part, actually. And the dimension to stay away from, not at that time understanding this whole thing. One last part, and then we'll go into the Mars aspect of this. Ike, why do these rituals take place at certain key times of the year and so often are related to phases of the moon? Arizona, because the moon has an influence on this planet and also the sun. These also take place during things that go on with the sun, but the moon, it's really kind of a very cyclical thing with the moon. It takes place on full moons, new moons, and it has to do with the current religion that they are using, the Druidic religion, and that they've taken and used. They still hold on to the Egyptian type of religion. They hold on to the Druidism, though, and they are currently calling themselves Druidic. And Druidism is tied in with the cycles of the moon, which has to do with planting, sowing, and harvesting, and also, with the blood rituals, victim sacrifice, and that kind of thing. I'll go ahead and let me get you to comment here, and then I'm going to read this other portion as far as the Mars thing, because I want to make a comment about that.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do, Zen, it's because I've come across some really mind-altering information. I wanted to get to you, and then I'm just going to jump out. So just give me 60 seconds to tell you what I found out.
Sure.
In fact, I thought of you when I fully grasped this truth. And I thought, this is going to be a piece to the puzzle in which you're going to, all the information and knowledge you got, you're going to be able to take. In other words, in as little as a week time, you're going to be completely looking through a different prism. So this is what I found out.
All right.
It is scientifically, physically, scripturally, a fact. I'm talking a fact. You can find out by doing just a little research that the Earth is actually a flat disk on a plane of ice, and that we actually live on a flat Earth, and that the stars and the sun and the moon are not what we've been told. Even the planets are considered wandering stars. But the sun is only about 3,000 miles up. It's 32 miles wide, pretty much the same as the moon. If you go to the NASA channel on YouTube and you go to Eric Dubay, Dubay, you will see that no matter which way you cut it, there's absolutely no evidence at all, nothing, that we live on a spherical planet that is spinning around the sun, spinning around spinning around the sun, going through the universe. There is zero evidence of it, nothing, absolutely, not even a picture of the Earth. There are no pictures of the Earth from these satellites. There's nothing. This whole system of being on a planet, a globe, came up by Copernicus. He was a Jesuit, and then somebody else came along, another Jesuit, who came up with gravity. But I'll just give you the chance to do the research, Zen, and you're going to be shocked, and it's going to be interesting to see how you're able to deconstruct and reconstruct your worldview. But it's just, I can tell you, Zen, I'm in the 4 days of researching, and there is just no evidence that the world that they set up, that we're just, some species that evolved on an outward planet, on a distant galaxy arm, and we're just one of many people. Turns out it's the furthest thing from the truth. But I'll grab those links and throw them in there. And so thanks for letting me come on, Zen.
Oh yeah. Well, let me ask you this before you go. Well, what about? Are you saying all the photos of like the Earth from outer space are fabricated? I mean, how do you?
Oh yeah. No, they're all composites. NASA admits it. NASA admits that all the photographs that we get are photoshopped. That's the way they have to do it, because they got these really technical equipment, and they can only take ribbons of the Earth, and then they have to rebuild them.
And so is this like for all the planets? Are they all flat planes?
Now that we don't know. They could actually be planets. But if you take a mechanical telescope and you don't go off the pictures that NASA gives, if you leave NASA out of the equation, the only thing that we really do know about Mars through a mechanical telescope is that what the Bible calls wandering stars. And also the Bible actually says that the earth is laid open and bare before the Lord. When the Lord returns, all eyes will see him. The star, the North Star that you see, when you do a time lapse, you're going to come across all this. You'll see all the stars in the heavens spin right around the North Star, which is our North Pole, which is in the middle of this circular disk. It even talks about the plane of the earth, and the earth is planted, and the earth is planted firm by the Lord and cannot be moved. I mean, all of the scriptures.
Let me ask you this other thing then. What about those people that have sailed around the world or have flown around the world? I mean, how?
Oh, exactly. Okay, sure. I don't want to hijack your show, but the people who sail around the world. So there's there's footage of people standing on a beach, and they watch like a tanker truck, a tanker or a big ship goes out to sea, miles and miles and miles out to sea until it disappears. Well, guess what, Zen? All you got to do is just pick a telescope up and take a look, and you can see the full plane. No matter, you can take a GoPro camera. You'll see this online. They'll put a a flat lens on it, not the fisheye lens, the flat lens. They'll get a weather balloon, a big balloon, and fill it full of helium. It'll go up to 120,000 feet. You'll watch that. The footage as it shows the Earth. The Earth is always dead level, all the way up. I mean, laser flat, all the way up until about 120 feet. The balloon pops because of the pressure or whatever. The guy who made the jump, Zen, who jumped out of the highest skydiver, I think he went up to like 139,000 feet, and then he in this capsule, and then he opens this door up and he jumps out. Now, the camera that's on his helmet is a GoPro camera that's got a fisheye lens in it, so it looks like the Earth is curved. But just go to that footage, Zen, and take a look. When he opens that door up to that capsule and he gets ready to jump from 139,000 feet, take a look at the plane of the Earth. Completely straight, razor straight, flat.
Yeah, but no, what I'm talking about is the people that fly around the Earth, or that, sail around the Earth. If it was flat, wouldn't they like fall off the edge somewhere?
No. The edge is actually, you can actually go and Google this, is what they call Antarctica. But on a ball model, Antarctica is on the bottom of the Earth. But in a flat disk plane model, this wall of ice, and you can go see it, it's a 150 to 200 foot wall of ice that is circular all the way around the disk of the Earth. In fact, Admiral Cook, Captain Cook and Admiral Clark spent 3.5 to 4 years looking for an opening into Antarctica. They went 69,000 miles all the way around. It was nothing but a solid wall of ice all the way around until they finally gave up, and then they went north. So what it appears to be is that on this, some people think it's an infinite plane of ice. We're like in a puddle. It's like the Lord's planted us on this plane, and whereas ice basically encloses the oceans.
Okay, but you're still not getting what I'm saying. Like, if a person goes east and they fly around the world, or they sail around the world, and then they keep going that way, and then they come back to their point of origin. And how's that done on a flat Earth, or
Because it's a circular disk. In other words, think of the Earth as flat, but a circle disk. You can do that. However, if what you're saying, in other words, if somebody was going to fly from LA to Tokyo with the spin of the Earth, because supposedly we're spinning 1,000 miles an hour. That's what I'm saying. You're about to get your mind blown, Zen. If they fly from LA to Tokyo and it takes them 10 hours, well, the person who flies from Tokyo against the spin of the Earth, that's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, why does it still take them 10 hours? Or ask yourself this, the actual map of the flat Earth, believe it or not, Zen, is on that Masonic UN flag. If you want to see the way the map of the real flat Earth is, the disk, circle, take a look at the UN map. They even have 33 different sections for 33. So that's why if you are at the furthest point, which is like Sydney or Melbourne, Australia, and you want to fly to Chile, you don't fly over the Antarctica. They don't allow you to do that. First off, you can't. It seems to be endless ice until you run into like another puddle and maybe another little world. But that is the farthest distance. That's 26, 30 hours. And where do you always land when you come from Sydney, Australia to go to Santiago, Chile? You land in either Montana or Oakland, because that's the direct route across the Earth. And if you take a look at any of the other people that fly, what do they all have in common? They all go close to the center, which is the North Pole. They always say that they go over the poles because it's quicker, they say. No. If you take a look at the flat Earth model, then you can see why they would, because that is at the center of our world. That's why 80% of the flights, uh, even if you think you're far down on the globe, 80% of them always go over the North Pole, connecting.
All right, well, you can just send me some links and I'll take a look at it. But it still doesn't make sense to me because if like we're a flat Earth, and wouldn't the oceans like pour off the edges or the side? I mean, but
No, no,
I don't
no.
want to spend any more time on this because this
Right,
is
right.
not
No,
the
what
focus
I'm
of
saying
this.
then is that the Earth is encompassed by 150 to 200 foot razor wall of ice all the way around, and it's just ice after that. We don't know what lies beyond it. But anyways, yeah, go ahead and get back to your show. I'll put the links in, but in a week you're going to be a flat earther, Zen. You're going to get your mind blown. Stan, thanks for taking my call.
All right, no problem.
All right, God
God
bless.
bless. All right. Well, the only reason I had listened is somebody else had sent me a bunch of information on this. I haven't like really got into it yet just because I haven't had time to focus on that. But it's interesting that a couple other people have also mentioned this to me. So I'll take a look at it. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. I apologize that I wasn't able to get into some of the information that I wanted to, but I think we'll still have time to cover what I wanted to as far as the Mars aspect of this. And so I'm going to read this, and then Olive, I didn't see your message. I got so many of them, so post it in the chat room. Um, because for whatever reason I couldn't find you on my contacts in Skype. So, and I'll answer you as I can. But I definitely want to read this and bring up this part of the show, and I'll check that in just a second. It says this. David Icke, in your experience being brought up in this Illuminati environment, were you ever told anything about where these reptilians came from? And what is the history of it all? Arizona. I was made to learn through Mothers of Darkness, which is a certain aspect of the organization because it was an early part of my training, the history of what was the Illuminati on this planet. And what I learned was that the Aryans were originally from Mars. And the reptilians came to that planet. They came from another place. They came to that planet to rule. They wanted to mix, so they said, with that race, but they became the overlords. And the Martians or Aryans were seeking to escape from it. They went to the moon and then they were attacked. And they then went to Earth and established culture here on Earth approximately 6,000 years ago. And at that point in time, they were doing well. And they were mixing with the indigenous population of this Earth. They were getting along. And then about 4,000 years ago, the reptilians arrived here and again began to take over. And they installed themselves in various places underground in the earth. And also this one part of them, the ruling part, took over and became involved in the politics and in the religion and started controlling through these means at that point in time. And using the gods and deities that were believed in on this planet, they started infiltrating into that and becoming that. And blood rituals started happening. And since that time, that is the way it has been. And presently, they claim to have come from the Merovingian bloodline, and there are 13 bloodlines in Europe, all that are called royalty, which are developed from or come from, and they include the Aryans in this. And there's been a big push in this century, for example, when the Nazis came into power, fascists talking about the purity of staying pure, and the Aryan bloodline staying pure. What it is actually all about is keeping the blue-eyed blonde or light red-haired people, the bloodlines, pure. Because it is more powerful, and what is in that blood for these reptilians is more powerful, and they need that. And when you start mixing it with people who were indigenous to this earth, then it is not as powerful. It has nothing to do with the person's skin color or nationality. It has to do with keeping the bloodline pure for their use. One other question from Ike, and then I want to bring up something else real quick. I'll get to you here in just a few minutes, Alan. Let me just cover this part. David Ike. So blonde-haired, blue-eyed people are the purest from the reptilians' point of view. And they want to keep that bloodline pure because of how they need to use it. Yes, Arizona Wilder, yes. When I myself realized it had to do with blonde hair and blue eyes, I could not do anything about my eyes, and I'm not able to wear contacts or I would have brown eyes. But one thing I did do was cut my hair off because that was part of the rank I was. My hair was down to my knees and I colored my hair darker. And there were times after I did cut it off that they had gotten to me, and so the hair would be light red. But that is being in compliance with them. And I did not want to be in compliance with them. I want to expose them, and this is part of it. And I won't be what they want me to be. All right. Now I'm going to go to something else that I wanted to cover real quick. But while I'm getting to that point, I want to make a comment. Now, remember the Nephilim giants, that they also have this fascination with the blonde hair and blue eyes, and also with the red hair and green eyes, and that some of what we know about the giants, the six-fingered, six-toed cannibal giants, that they were red-haired, like what the Paiute Indians spoke of as being the cannibal giants that were indigenous to the Americas and other parts of the world, that they also had this particular anomaly, that even what we call the tall whites, and that Credo Mutwa, he speaks about the Chitta Uri, but then he speaks of this other group called the tall whites. And there's mention of them as having white hair and white eyes, or white hair and blue eyes, and also this other subset as being red hair and blue eyes, or red hair and green eyes. All right, let me take this call real quick. Hey, you there, Olive? You got a comment on what I'm talking about here?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. I have that disc, that DVD of Arizona Wilder and David Icke, and it's a pretty amazing video. I've watched it quite a few times, and a few other of David Icke's. A lot of people say he's a shill, and I mean, we got Jack. You're talking about the flat Earth now, so I mean, the thing about the sun and the way that all is, but that's something different.
Yeah.
David Icke, and that, yeah. So, what do you think about that? I mean, you think it's a shill, or was it a legitimate interview? I was looking into.
Well, I definitely think the information is legitimate, but I think David Icke is part of the establishment. That there's a video of him doing, these Masonic hand signs with that lady from the.
Yeah, I've seen. Wasn't I seen? I think his wife doing one. I had a post from another radio station in a bulletin board, maybe about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one, but
yeah.
I definitely think that they are establishment. It shows him, the lady with I forgot the series that she does, Carrie something, but they did an interview, and at the very last part of the interview, if somebody wants to look it up, you can just look up David Icke Masonic handshake, and it'll pull up what I'm talking about. But I definitely think the information is very relevant, but that there are certain aspects of what he teaches that you have to be weary of, because he supports the whole Merovingian bloodline, and that Christ had children by Mary Magdalene, and he also says that he was Jesus, and that he's the Christ, and things of that nature. So you have to be you have to be wary.
Yeah, it's interesting that he says that. Even Jesus said, "Don't you know that you are gods?"
Right. Yeah.
And so, I don't know. He could be part of like the what is it, gear? His disclosure on UFOs and the phenomenon and the other anomalies, as well as David Icke could be the same thing. He's part of this established bloodline we know somewhere.
Yeah, could be.
But he's being part of the soft disclosure, you think?
Possibly, because he certainly has brought out a lot of relevant information. And as I said, it's like that 96% truth, but that just a little bit of leaven that you have to be wary of.
Well, I don't know if we're going to get 100% truth from anybody, but I know that when you speak well, and you do well on your shows. And I usually don't call in a lot because you're doing so good.
Well, I appreciate that.
I don't want to break it up, but how does I'll hang up after this, but if you could just throw this in, how does this tie in with the archons and the Nag Hammadi with the Emerald Tablets? If you could tie all those in, and
certainly.
And then I'll just go ahead and hang up. And you're having a wonderful show. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you, Olive. Thank you, brother.
Okay.
God bless. The archons, as mentioned in the Gnostic text, they are the same thing as what we're talking about. What Credo Mutwa calls the Chitta Uri. What the Emerald Tablets speak of as the serpent-headed beings. What the Bible speaks of as the Nakash. What the Hindus speak of as the Nagas, and the Chinese speak of as the dragon people, what the Cherokee call the rattlesnake people. It's all the same phenomena. What the Mayans call Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, these are all the same beings. All right. Before we went to break, I was talking about what Arizona Wilder had made mention of, speaking about the possibility of these, some of these skull and bones being from Mars, and that these Draco beings arrived to take over Mars as well, and that was one of the reasons why that planet was brought into judgment, much like Tiamat. That the same story is spoken about with Tiamat, and that they took over there as well, and they corrupted humanity, tried to enslave the pre-Adamic peoples there, just like they tried to enslave the people on Mars, and that a judgment was brought against them there on Tiamat, and that it began the next chapter of life on this planet, but that Mars was destroyed in similar fashion, and that Atlantis, same thing. It's the same modus operandi, that these beings, as overseers, they continue to try to oppress and take over and to rule from the shadows, and to take over those that are, the legitimate authority as far as the human beings, the humankind. And it's been the same thing over and over and over. And at every step of the way, the Most High has had to judge them and bring destruction to the things that they have established. And then they are forced to begin again, to restart again. And so, keeping in mind what Arizona Wilder had spoken about as far as Mars, I want to highlight and bring up something that the strangest source, Rush Limbaugh. He talked about a 7-minute spiel he had on one of his shows talking about the Gore report, and that in the Gore report he was talking about life on Mars and some of the things that. Well, I'm going to just read it so we don't run out of time. He says, as I mentioned recently, ladies and gentlemen, after reviewing data from one of the Mars rovers, NASA big press conference the other day concluded that Mars was once drenched with enough water to support life in a good habitable environment. I mean, this is incredible discovery, and NASA has still had to go out there and say that there's no proof that life existed. All they said was that conditions were there for there to be life, but this is not all NASA said, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot that is not being discussed here. And as a powerful, influential member of the media, I know more than you do, especially about this. I have seen a highly classified report that has not been released publicly, and it probably won't be unless you consider my talking about it here to be releasing it publicly. It's a top secret report, codenamed the Gore Report. It was prepared by scientists from Area 52 in New Mexico, and they analyzed the Mars data, and there's some findings in this report, and I can understand why they don't want to release this thing, and I don't know it all, but I want to pass off what some of the Gore Report says. Now, before I continue reading, I want to make mention that I know a lot of people believe that this was all just a spoof, and that he was doing this just as, like almost like a Saturday Night Live skit making fun of humanity. But what is relevant here is that some of the things he talks about aligns with all of these other things that I have brought forth. And that whether you believe he was spoofing us or not, the information is relevant. And as I said, it seems to be confirming witness to some of the other aspects of the esoteric information I brought forth. And so I think it's relevant, and that he indeed is privy to something that the public was not. And here's the relevant portions that I'm going to read. There was life on Mars. That's what NASA is not being upfront. There was life. Everybody knows it. We can't be the only people occupying the universe. It's impossible. Why do we think we are? The only people God created, and sorry for those of you that don't believe in God, the only people who evolved from apes. And so it's clear that there was life elsewhere. And now that NASA has kind of let the cat out of the bag, if there were habitable conditions up there, we know there was life there. In fact, they found some DNA evidence up there that compares favorably to members of the Skull and Bones Society here on Earth. Remember what Arizona said. These people were highly industrialized, the Martians. They were technologically superior, and they were very arrogant people. And they thought that the power and the force of their existence was all that was needed to sustain them. And they didn't care a whit about conservation. They didn't care a whit about preserving anything. They got rid of everything that was pristine. In fact, they used the internal combustion engine. They were globalists. They got rid of all the countries on that planet. And they had just one giant society. And the powerful, rich just absorbed everything they needed from the best parts of the planet. They used it for themselves, and everybody basically suffered until everybody died out, because what happened was there was no checks and balances. Now, I'm going to skip just a little bit. But I want to also make mention that, remember, it's like it is here on this planet. It's this reptilian Nakash presence ruling through humanity that keeps us using petroleum and oil and destroying the planet, even though we don't, we could have free energy. And so the same thing happened on Mars. So, all right, continuing. They had rainforests. You don't hear about this. They had ancient rainforests. They had jungles. They had so much oil and gas. They had reserves out the wazoo. In fact, one of the things they found on Mars is that it's possible that there's still some there. Tiny little amounts, but it's clear. You saw the pictures from Mars. I saw the skeletons. At least I saw the fossils of the skeletons. There were people there, or there were beings there, but it looked like Pompeii. It looked like these people all died huddled together, and it was just swarmed and in an instant. You know, they were one day there and then gone. So many people living close together, it has to have been the result of urban sprawl. Nobody had any space, nobody had any room, and I saw it from the pictures that were released. It's clear, ladies and gentlemen, Mars was once the jewel of the solar system, and it was raped. Mars was raped. This is what NASA knows. This is what the Gore report says. Mars was raped by robber barons. Capitalism, dependence on combustible engines, led to global warming. The ecosystem that sustained everybody was destroyed. That's why the water they found is at the equator area. The ice caps melted. Exactly what's happening here, folks. Exactly what's happening here. These people were advanced. Not everybody on Mars died. And this is what's fascinating about this report. Not everybody on Mars died. Some were able to flee and some were able to get off the planet. This is what they can't afford to release. UFOs, yep, all these sightings, all of these blinking lights, all of these unexplained things, they're real. And that's why they're calling this Area 52. I'm skipping a little more. Those are Martians escaping the destruction. I think this goes way back before we were alive. UFOs have been happening all over. But the elites got off. The elites were able to travel in space. They weren't very many of them, but they were able to get off and they fled the planet in time. The stunning thing about the Mars report, the Gore report, is that they're here. These people that destroyed Mars are here. They are on Earth, folks. They are in America. They work at Halliburton. They worked at Enron. They worked at WorldCom. They're at Boeing. They came to America, and the Gore report clearly illustrates they have not learned a thing from their experiences on Mars. The truth is out there, far, far out there. And so, with the 2 minutes that we have remaining, do you see connecting links to what Arizona Wilder said about Mars and these particular beings and how they were, well, I'll just read it again real quick. And what I learned was that the Aryans were originally from Mars and the reptilians came to that planet. They came from another place. They came to that planet to rule. They wanted to mix, so they said, with that race, but they became the overlords. And the Martians or Aryans were seeking to escape from it. They went to the moon and then they were there attacked. And then they went to Earth and established culture here on Earth approximately 6,000 years ago. And then about 4,000 years ago, the reptilians arrived here and again began to take over. And they installed themselves in various places underground in the earth. And also, this one part of them, the ruling part, took over and became involved in the politics and then in the religion and started controlling through these means at that point in time and using the gods and deities that were believed in on this planet. They started infiltrating into that and becoming that. And blood rituals started happening, and since that time, that is the way it has been. All right, everyone, we'll pick up next week. God bless all. Serpent form, how they were able to penetrate and to take over the rulership of planet and to parade as the kings and queens, the presidents, prime ministers, those that are basically controlling the nations of the world and that have put forth an agenda which is contrary to the goodwill of humanity and to what would be beneficial destiny or fate as far as the collective of humanity. And so these kind of things are completely absolutely and 100% connected to the esoteric aspects of what we are dealing with as world, as far as the New World Order and the secret societies and their connections to the Brotherhood of Darkness or the Sons of Belial, the worship of Baal and Ashtaroth and individuals of such nature, and that a lot of the pagan cultures that worship the pantheon of gods and goddesses, and a lot of times they will depict them in hybrid form. Sure, Olive, no problem. I will absolutely accept calls. Just give me a little bit of time to establish the premise for what we're going to be going into, because I'm going to be reading some very interesting information connected to what we are talking about and what we have been talking about over the past 4 shows. And this is the whole series that I'm doing is going to set the premise, the last in the series, on the topic of the ancient mysteries associated to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, or Thoth, and to Atlantis, the prophecies associated with them, and the things such as remote viewing, which are connected to the esoteric aspects of our ancient past and the mythology, the legends and lore of many cultures and peoples worldwide. And that the things that we've come to know. Hello, everyone. Welcome, Olive and Love and Darla, Matthew, R3, and Girl and PDX and all the rest, Nilla, Sky, all those that are not in the immediate scroll, Comet, Daku, Herbal, Karen, Patrick. There's a lot of you in the chat room. George, Hemp, Henry, and that's just what I see on the side of the chat box. But thank you, all of you, for joining us, and it's going to be an interesting show, I believe. And after this week and next week, we're going to have a string of guests joining us to speak about many, many different topics, and all of them are very well versed in their research, and will share revelation which is connected to the things that we are dealing with as world, and as far as the push for New World Order, the whole thing with Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini, and the orchestration of 3 global wars in order to push the agenda for global government, and the directives that they have on the Georgia Guidestones, which are, the emphasis for depopulation, control, police state measures where they can rule with impunity, and also the whole agenda for the strong delusion and the revelation of the fallen angels and their presence here upon this planet and within this solar system. And that it reminds me of something that Arizona Wilder had said in an interview that she had with Ike on the strange connections between the Nakash, or the fallen angels, the rebel angels, as parading as off-worlders or as gods and the creators of humanity, but that the ruling elite have these connections with these beings, with this ancient serpent, what the Bible in Revelation 12 cites as that old dragon, that ancient serpent, known as the devil, and Satan, which has deceiveth the whole world. And those of you that have followed my work or have read my books, you know that I equate the ancient dragon and the Nakash of Genesis chapter 3 with being that that being, or that host of beings, a pantheon of beings, that these individuals were worshipped by the pre-Adamic cultures and civilizations, and even largely worshipped by much of the world even today. And that the elites of the world, the supposed royals that are sitting on the thrones of the world, it also is in connection to their having on their coat of arms the personification, the symbolism of the ancient dragon, or the feathered serpent, or the what is in modern times the eagle, which we know that in America the eagle is a symbol for well, we think it's a symbol for the bald eagle and the great which is very elegant and graceful in flight. But if you look to the ancient traditions, and like in Rome, they also had the symbolism of the eagle on their banners, on their standards, and that these particular eagles, prior to whether it was a two-headed eagle or a regular eagle, that the embodiment of the eagle actually is traced back to the phoenix, and that the phoenix is one of those personifications of a feathered serpent or a winged snake. And so all these things connect together. And in the last show prior to the ending of it, I read really quick. We ended with a reading of what was the 8th tablet of the 15 that are available to us, and it's in my opinion the most intriguing tablet of them all, and that it memorializes how the Anunnaki, or the rebel angels, in their feather.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Pick it up next week. Visionary adepts can entertain angels. Most, however, are unable to construe the manifestation of angelic hosts in varied form. We are precarious when in the company of angels. It seems it is beyond our scope to comprehend the interventional spirit, ignorant and dismissive. We placate such occurrence should it occur, relegating the specter of such possibility to imaginative inclination. Few understand ceremony which could invoke angelic interlude, seeking dialogue with ethereal proprietor, the Holy Spirit. Welcome all. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen on Studio B at Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. And I thank you for joining me for what should be